Well, let's get into it. Page 1, the Tapestry. The topics of healing, health, and even awareness are vast and include a wealth of information from all sorts of perspectives. You could look at all of the biomechanical aspects of the body, the functions of enzymes, cells, and organs, and how Western science has explored each tiny microscopic part. You could start with food and how it affects the system, the basics of what nutrients are needed for proper function, and in what amounts. If you didn't like the mechanistic view of the system, you could explore the system according to traditional Chinese medicine, which would involve meridians, elements that correspond to various organs, tissues, and functions, and a whole myriad of interrelationships that give a unique picture of how your internal environment works. You could also look at it through the chakra system, a series of energy centers which govern organ function and are intimately entwined with our emotions and awareness. There are also other views of the body, spirit, and medicine, which include earth-centered, shamanic, and herbal traditions from around the world. In the West, we tend to only validate the scientific tradition, which is believed to be superior and somehow more true. But there are many ways to see the body and the processes of healing, and many truths in countless places in the world. In many cases, the differences are in the languages that each system uses to describe the same thing. But the underlying principles end up often being quite similar. It turns out there are many ways for humans to heal. This is a blessing, but it can also lead to confusion about what really works. This book is not an exploration of the various healing modalities and their validity, strengths, and weaknesses. There are libraries full of literature exploring nutrition, traditional Chinese medicine, biochemistry, neurobiology, and hands-on healing, to name only a few topics. There are also people of every culture and color who have deep knowledge of true healing and of ancient wisdom, which they use to guide others along their paths. Instead, this book is really about a way to see it all and a handful of key concepts that I have found to explore myself and others in living a more fulfilling life. Sounds like my animals are coming closer. The tapestry is woven, light-filled, colors dancing. You are both part of the tapestry and a weaver, pulling threads from starlit darkness, breathing the colors into life, fingers spread, weaving, thread over thread, creating the fabric of your experience and your life. Sometimes it's easier to explain a big concept in a metaphor. We grasp more somehow in the feeling of the story and the images. Sometimes it's in what is not said where it makes more sense, because on some level that is not analytical, it feels true. The idea of a tapestry is my chosen story for you, and it's where we're starting. In order to see many pieces of the puzzles of healing and make sense of it for yourself, you will need a container to hold them in. You need to create for yourself a way to see the world that gives you a working framework to sort the pieces out. Unfortunately, no one gives you a book when you are born with how this body, mind, and spirit works. If a human did give you something close to this, it would probably be too mechanistic and lead you to think your system is like a car, which it's not. Although aspects of your system are often explained in terms like a machine, you are indeed much, much more complicated. You can never take all of you apart and put you back together again and have it be you. What organizes all of that internal working, what feels and loves in you, is not explained in the mechanical workings of your cells. So indeed, there is obviously another layer, or more, of you that, although seems to be experienced while you are in the body, is not really found in the body. This life force is a topic of endless conversation and fighting as people vie for being right about their version of this greater life force. For our purposes, we're just going to acknowledge that there is a life force that is within us, that is connected to something greater which we are then a part of. More essential than naming it is the meaning we have for this greater force of life. For myself, and for the purpose of this book, any reference to the divine or greater life force is thoroughly synonymous with the highest, purest, most all-encompassing, harmonious love ever imaginable. This great love comes by many names all over the world. But if you mean this love when you say God, Mother God, Goddess, Great Spirit, Source, Great Creator, Allah, or countless other names of the divine, then we are speaking of the same thing by different names. Now back to the manual. It turns out that although we don't get to get a classic textbook upon arrival, we are actually given a kind of living manual, which includes the keys of how it all works. The catch is, it's kind of in code. It turns out your body and its vast layers of interconnections and your awareness is your manual to the universe, your own personal access to the mysteries of the world and the principles of balance, change, and cosmic creation. I'll explain this more and more as we go along, but know that you already have all of the answers in yourself, in your very self. They may not be evident yet, but they are there, and we are going to endeavor to help you see clearly what is already encoded in your very existence. Indeed, this coding, this living language of light, is expressed in all things. It is the language of love and light, woven into patterns, forms, your smile, and the universe itself. And now back to the analogy of the tapestry. What is it all made up of? What makes up the threads? Let's start at a very basic level. Some of the core physical world threads for your individual tapestry are woven in your DNA. You have your mother's hair, your father's statue, or your grandmother's nose. We won't get into this area so much right now, but you can easily see that some threads will be placed down while developing in your mother's womb. Now imagine also that what you eat is like a thread of this life tapestry. It has a specific color, texture, and strength, depending on what it is. A lot of bananas creates a different kind of thread than a lot of processed meat. Now imagine that not just food, but all the physical actions your body performs or is subject to are also threads. This might include things like exposure to toxins, or even your posture, which puts constant strain on one part of your body or another, and maybe the shoulder injury from falling on the ice that never healed properly, or the effects of wearing high heels every day on your feet, legs, and hips. You don't have to think of all the physical threads. Right now we're just setting up the idea that the physical world, which you interact with, and which you put inside you, usually through eating and breathing, are part of the tapestry. The woven blanket of threads that creates your body and your experiences. You're there because it gets way more complicated. When I refer to the tapestry, I'm referring to your own creation of your life, and also to a larger tapestry that includes all of life. You can imagine that you have a little square of this larger tapestry which you are creating. Your little piece is interwoven with the larger fabric, and so is affected by it, and in turn affects it. This means when you imagine your life and your small piece of fabric, you must know that you will be affected by something greater, and that you are already woven into that greater fabric. Your body and spirit is already being moved by a life force that is highly organized and intelligent. Indeed, this life force is expressed as you and is also moving through you. This life force that is highly organized and intelligent is running by various laws of nature, which are woven into your system. If this was not the case, your body, under only your mind's conscious awareness, would cease immediately. If you had to organize and maintain this incredible functioning life force which is embodied in this human form, it would never happen. How many of us could even remember to breathe, let alone control hormones, run miniature power plants in our cells called mitochondria, and pass nutrients back and forth between cells millions of times a second? So this greater life force organizes itself through various natural laws, which we can study, and which play a pivotal part in running our bodies. These are more of the threads which are woven into our tapestries. These threads, which include the movement of natural laws and forces within us, like magnetism, diffusion, and atomic bonding, originate from a greater consciousness than ours, and form an underlying weave upon which life is created. So far, there are already a lot of threads. Most of what we've talked about are threads which we perceive more or less as falling into a physical category. They are things we can see and touch, and most often understand through scientific studies. We can wrap our heads around bad posture affecting the body, and mercury poisoning our tissues, these are also things we can see under a microscope and validate with diagnostic testing. Likewise, the natural laws and processes that our bodies are governed by, such as gravity, also seem, on the surface, to be fairly straightforward and logical. Yeah, most of Western medicine is based on this physical level of the tapestry. It assumes that everything can be explained with scientific principles down to the tiniest part. Anything unexplained is merely something that our science hasn't gotten to yet, but it's assumed that science has the answers. Most people are comfortable with this part of the tapestry, although individuals may not yet understand how each physical aspect, such as food, affects their system. They can easily recognize that it must. The key is that as you learn about the physical function of the body, you gain valuable ways to affect the tapestry on this level. This is because when you become aware of the thread, you most often have the ability to change it, or in the least to strengthen it. In the physical realm, threads are most often changed by physical means. Although that change involves our choice, our consciousness, it still involves choosing one physical item over another. Kale over potato chips, removal of gangrene over leaving it, for example. And the effect on the system tends to still generally be governed by the natural laws we found in science, most often Newtonian science. The physical world has some clear guidelines or rules by which it is organized and functions. Although some incredible people have shown that they can transcend these laws or affect them in amazing ways, such as the monks who can heat a wet blanket in the middle of winter or consciously control their heartbeats, most of us are not able to master that level yet. For example, a toxic mushroom will cause liver damage and failure based on the chemicals within it and the known ways that those chemicals affect the body's cells and functions. If you'd like to live after eating one, you should probably focus on the physical and get a substance into the liver that will neutralize the toxicity. Having said this, I'm pretty sure I'd be praying for my life on the way to the emergency room. On the other hand, when you become aware of eating foods that optimally support health and are less toxic, you remove some threads, like toxins and processed foods, and add new ones. Western science has some incredible information out there on how to affect these threads of the physical world, but it is by no means the whole picture. Again, we are not machines or solely the outcome of known physical laws. This leads us to the next humongous category of threads. This new category is often less understood and harder to grasp. These are the threads of consciousness. In some teachings, these are divided up into mental, emotional, and spiritual categories. But for this book, there's no need to be too technical. The term consciousness usually refers to the state of being awake and aware of one's existence, sensations, thoughts, and surroundings, the awareness or perception of something by a person, or the mind as characterized by thoughts, feelings, and personal will. So this term then is usually used to encompass the totality of our experience that we can't seem to measure or see with a microscope. We might know the neurotransmitter that is associated with sadness, but science really can't look at that neurotransmitter and describe the depth of feeling someone has over the loss of a loved one. Areas of the brain may be linked to certain functions, but the experience of our emotions, memories, and thoughts lives in the intangible world of consciousness. Even though consciousness is intangible to our current science, it nonetheless makes up a significant amount of the threads of our tapestry. Basically, I'm saying that what you think and feel, the totality of your awareness, is significantly creating the function of your body and the experience of your life. To go way further, some traditions believe that this level of our being, our consciousness, is what creates and informs the 3D physical level of life. These traditions believe that all of our health and our experiences here on Earth are rooted in awareness. Consciousness itself has many layers of complexity that can be seen as energy patterns. These patterns exist in multiple layers of which our physical world, including our body, is still considered to be consciousness, but in its most dense expression. Source love spans all levels of awareness and expression, from the most complex, dense, and diversified forms to the most unified, expansive form, which we often refer to as God. This is where it gets more complicated and harder to really conceptualize well. You are the drop in the ocean. the smallest part, and you are the unified ocean, God, with endless layers in between and within. So there is a universal consciousness that creates the base energy patterns or threads that make the structure of our forms. But then our own individual awareness is layered and woven with that base structure while simultaneously being an expression of that universal force. It can be a bit much to wrap your head around. In this perspective, all levels of creation are expressions of the Creator's consciousness, whether animate or inanimate. This means that our designations for what is physical, mental, or spiritual are really all terms that are referring to the consciousness of God at different levels of manifestation. All things are consciousness, as they are part of the awareness, the organization, and the expression of the one source love. Still, designations can be useful, so we will continue to divide things up to have a little bit more clarity. It's also noted here that although everything may be part of the consciousness of the Great Spirit, the drop of water that is you may not have any awareness of the infinite love and wisdom of this larger consciousness body that is Source. Hence, consciousness in terms of your own healing often refers only to what you individually have awareness of. As you expand your individual consciousness, you are able to feel more of the unified body of Source love, which you are within and an expression of. So then, to continue on with our tapestry analogy, each of our thoughts is a thread. Each emotion and feeling is a thread. Every experience we have felt on a soul level that affected us deeply is a thread. Just as it was for the physical realm, these threads of consciousness have certain textures, colors, and strengths, and can make the cloth stronger or weaker in parts. Each one is interwoven with all of the other threads that came from the physical category and the underlying weave of the Great Spirit. All of the threads together create the totality of function of the body and your experience of that function. No one thread works alone to produce the strength of the cloth, yet each thread can make a difference. For the threads of consciousness that we generally perceive as mostly invisible, you can imagine that some thoughts can produce better health than others. This isn't rocket science. We all know that saying mean things to ourselves causes more stress than thinking we are awesome. In the physical realm, affecting threads seems more straightforward. You change something physical, but not so in the consciousness realm. You need to conceptualize it a little differently. Imagine that we pick threads, which represents thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, from the starlit blackness that lies beyond your little piece of the tapestry. This starlit vast depth is the source of all possible threads and the source of love that bursts all things and to which all returns. The work is to shine the light of our conscious loving awareness on each thread. We then can choose to put back into the depth those threads, thoughts, feelings, and beliefs which do not create the beautiful, strong tapestry that we are endeavoring to weave as our bodies and lives. In turn, we can call forth from loving Source the threads which will support us and allow our souls to flourish. Each beautiful thread we're able to weave in affects the whole blanket. It ripples like the raindrops on the lake, soft movements of consciousness that affect other threads, maybe a thread we didn't notice before, that now we can see more clearly and have the opportunity to change. And on it goes. Our tapestry changes.